Hi, my name is Dr. Alexa Parker. I'm a chiropractic physician with over 9 years of experience. I have a bachelor's degree in nutrition, and I've studied specifically childhood neurobehavioral disorders through the Carrick Institute of Graduate Studies, specifically under Dr. Robert Malillo, who is the author of this book, Neurobehavioral Disorders of Childhood, which is the textbook, as well as the author of Disconnected Kids, which is an excellent insight into this brand new way of really looking at these childhood disorders or adult disorders, ADHD, autism, as well as dyslexia and learning disabilities. I also have a certification utilizing the interactive metronome, and I've studied functional blood chemistry analysis and functional endocrinology under Dr. Datiz Karazian. And functional meaning that basically there's a norm that you should have in all the areas of your blood work. That means that you're a happy, healthy individual. In other words, there's certain lab values that we look at, whereas normally a particular lab will give norms, when generally those are sick lab values, or people that go to that lab that are generally ill. So we found that actually through research that there's actually a functional range that you should have. And so looking at these kids specifically, of course, if we evaluate their labs, we can actually find issues in regards to their functional ranges, which a lot of doctors are missing those ranges. Things like hypoglycemia, blood sugar problems, gut problems, adrenal gland problems, anemias, all of these different things. I specifically have over 225 hours in childhood neurobehavioral rehabilitation through the Carrick Institute. And basically, if you look at the statistics today, many of you, as you may know, if you have a child with one of these disorders, that these problems are exploding. The incidence of ADHD, autism, Asperger's syndrome, dyslexia, Tourette syndrome, all of these problems are just, exploding at a huge rate. Approximately 16 million children have been diagnosed with severe attention, behavioral, and learning problems. Over the last 10 years, the number of children in special ed classes in the U.S. has climbed by 46.9%. In Florida, the number of children in special education has increased from 6% to 13.2%. That's more than double than just 5 years. Just about 10 years ago, only 1 out of every 10,000 children or child was diagnosed with autism. Currently, the stats are about 1 in 150 to be diagnosed with autism, and we know that that's actually even a small number. 1 in every 5 6-year-olds will be diagnosed with some type of neurological disorder that can affect their social skills and their ability to interact with others. So we know that this problem has rapidly become worse, and we have this huge problem with our children, and it's costing a lot for the parent, the school system, and society. ADHD is actually the leading childhood disorder in the world, and Ritalin, or that class of drugs, is actually the most widely prescribed for that. The problem, however, with this class of medications is that they're only effective, first of all, for 70% of the people taking them, of the children taking them. Also, they have adverse side effects. Also, they only work while the child is actually taking the medication. Recent studies also link Ritalin to sudden deaths in kids, and there's a 500% increased risk of heart attack. This is really, really, scary, because this type of medication actually speeds up, their metabolism in their brain in order to actually shut it down, because already these kids are already wound up. So it actually speeds them up more so that they can actually slow down. So we know that there's risks involved with that. And it's not correcting the actual cause of the problem. Last year, doctors in the U.S. wrote approximately 20 million prescriptions for Ritalin. So we know that, there's more use of medication now, and it's widely used. However, the problem is continuing to grow and to get worse, and it's not correcting it. It's not correcting the actual cause of the imbalance with the child. So basically what we're talking about today is the idea of the functional disconnection syndrome. This is kind of a revolutionary idea, really looking at the brain, the different parts of the brain, the right and the left hemisphere. There's actually been numerous studies recently that actually point to an imbalance of electrical activity between the areas of the brain, particularly the right and the left hemispheres, to be the most affected. The name for this is functional disconnection syndrome. You know, up until recently, you know, ADHD, Asperger's, and autism have actually been classified as more of a behavioral or psychological or even an academic problem. However, now we're actually seeing that there's actually areas in the brain that we can pinpoint that are directly causing these types of behaviors that are related to the types of behaviors that these children have. So we can really correlate it to those weak or under-firing areas in the brain. And the interesting thing is, and the great thing is that we know that the brain is not damaged. We know that the brain is actually functioning and healthy. However, it's just under-firing or under-connected. So they can actually get an imbalance. For example, when like a concert orchestra, when a certain, you know, when they can't stay in rhythm, it can actually throw the entire chorus orchestra off, right? Same thing with the brain. When it can't stay in rhythm, it can actually throw the entire hemisphere off key. So the other side actually tries to tune it out. This can cause a disharmony to such a degree that the two sides can no longer effectively share and integrate information. The brain actually becomes functionally disconnected. And it's, you know, there's certain abilities that actually reside in the right hemisphere versus the left hemisphere. And we know that one side can become extremely dominant, and particularly with these children that have ADHD or autism or dyslexia, but particularly ADHD and autism, we know that the right side of their brain is actually affected the most. So it's actually weaker on that side. Again, it doesn't mean that there's brain damage. It just means that that area is weaker, just like a muscle. If you don't move that muscle, it becomes extremely weak. And it's the same thing with the brain. Your brain actually gets fed through stimulation, you know, through movement, through hearing, through sound, you know, through smell, through taste, all of those different things. And there can actually be imbalances with that. Particularly when we think of a right hemispheric imbalance or disorder, we're generally going to see more of the symptoms like ADD, ADHD, Asperger's, OCD, Tourette's, and autism. Okay? If we have a left hemispheric imbalance, we're going to see things more like in the academic realm generally, particularly like with dyslexia or learning disabilities. Okay? So not to say that we actually use those labels, but generally those are the kind of things that we're going to see with those imbalances there. In a recent Mayo Clinic study, brain scans were performed and they revealed important differences in the structure and brain activity of people with ADHD. They found decreased activity in the areas of the brain that control impulsivity and attention. Other studies have shown that there are no hard lesions found in the brains of these children. For example, someone who would have a hard lesion would be someone like who has multiple sclerosis, right? Generally, there's actually a lesion that you can find on a brain MRI. However, with these children, there isn't a hard lesion, okay? But however, there has been found to be less activity. Therefore, these underactive areas, if we find them and localize them, we can actually